today we're doing something a little bit different and I'm a bit nervous. Anyway, welcome back to season 10 of the podcast. And I am opening this season with my lovely friend, Susan McCulley, who, if you have listened to any previous episodes of the podcast, you'll be very familiar with. And I can actually see she's just entered the waiting room. So I'm going to invite her in and then explain a little bit more about why I'm feeling a bit nervous. Okay, see you in a mo. So Susan is now with me in the room, and I'm just going to hand over to her.
I'm happy to take that baton. Hey, friend. It's good to see you. It's good to be together.
Oh, it's really good.
So lots of creative energy has been flowing from you, as always, but a particular focus lately, and a new volume of My Darling Girl poetry. Ooh, it's a big project and a big release. Yeah, like letting go, letting it out into the world to have its own experience. And I'm curious if we could maybe back up quite a bit and go to talk about the time when the first Darling Girl poems started arriving to you, and what that experience was like, what was going on in your life, in your external life, and then what was going on inside that began this process, this project that probably didn't feel like a project when it started.
No, absolutely not. And in fact, felt like was just one piece of writing that landed on a piece of paper and began with those words, my darling girl. And it's really interesting, actually, because I think, like so many of us, I'd journaled before, or I'd written before, not necessarily calling it journaling, but I'd written before, and I'd had a kind of connection with some sort of inner wisdom or inner knowingness, but it hadn't arrived in quite that form before. And so I was in Ibiza. I was on a yoga retreat. I was in a process of recovery from burnout, and I was given, like everybody else on the retreat, this invitation to write a letter from our future self, actually, our future kind of wisest, older self, back to the person that we were in that moment. And this piece of poetry-ish landed on the paper beginning with the words, my darling girl. And it's funny, actually, just kind of recalling that, because I had forgotten that that's where the voice kind of originally felt like it came from. It felt like it came from a future me. And that first piece I shared with a couple of my roomies on the retreat, and they both started crying, I seem to remember, telling me that I needed to share it with others. And there was an intensity in the moment of writing it that felt like flow. And, I think it was the first time I was really, really consciously aware of the experience of that word that other people talked about. and then that was in 2017.
Mm-hmm.
And then since then, I would say, well, at least 100, maybe hundreds. I don't know actually how many. But they land in times when I really, really need them. And so at that point in 2017, I was embarking on a huge process of inner and outer change. And that voice, that process of writing accompanied me through that whole period of change, and really enabled me to get inside incredibly complex things that I was feeling. Do you know what? Gosh, I'm talking to you now. I've got such a wave of emotion. I mean, it's like my body is actually, I'm shaking.
Mm.
And at any moment, I might burst into tears.
Mm. That's some interesting information. Yeah. So what it strikes me as an interesting thing. Having read the first volume of My Darling Girl, but not yet the second, I guess I always imagined that the poems were written from now back to a younger self. It's very interesting, and I would say quite different to have it be a future self writing to yourself now in a tangle of transition, in a place of uncertainty, or maybe just feeling a bit adrift in some way, and having this voice come from the future to support you. That feels very different
And incredibly comforting.
Yeah.
Because it meant that throughout that whole period, I was accompanied.
Yes.
It reminds
wise
me,
part, yeah.
Yeah, and it reminds me a bit of that, the Ram Dass quote about all we're all doing is walking each other home. And that feeling, that really visceral feeling that I have, which is that I am accompanying myself, or there is a part that is accompanying me.
Mm-hmm.
And that we all have this part, this inner voice, this wisest,
Right.
kindest, clearest part that we can tap into.
Yeah, so let's talk about that, since we do all have that inner wise one, but most of us have a whole chorus of voices in there, not all of which are so kind and supportive. So it sounds to me, I mean, it's certainly in regards to the first poem, it sounds like you were in a particular place. You were in a retreat situation. You were focused in a particular way, and that allowed you to perhaps turn the volume down on the less helpful ones and turn the volume up on this wise woman who is coming to accompany you. And so when you're not on a visa on retreat, how do you find her? How do you connect with that wise part?
So, okay, so what my instinctive response to that question is that it's almost as though that first one opened a channel that then meant I was able to tap into that part, that voice, whenever I needed it. And still today, even though the that really turbulent period of change has settled dramatically, and I would say I'm in a much more sort of grounded, still fluid, but more grounded place. I can still tap into that voice.
Sure.
When needed. And it's interesting actually, because I think with volume 2, the some of the tone of the writing has changed in line with the changes that I have made and been through and experienced. And what I found at the beginning, so when I first kind of returned from Ibiza, there was this sort of realization of, I have a memory of kind of feeling rubbish, like feeling like stuck, and I don't know, like everything that I brought with me from that experience in Ibiza had sort of fallen by the wayside, and and then remembering that piece of writing and actually going back to it, rereading it, and then asking for some guidance, and just beginning writing those words, "my darling girl," at the top of a piece of paper, and then stuff sort of tumbling out. And so I think actually, really those words, "my darling girl," became the channel. It was a way of addressing myself in the tenderest term. Yeah, I think there's something really, really powerful about that, actually. And maybe that's something that resonates with others too, that, it's like, it's such a term of endearment. It only feels kind to me. And so therefore, whatever words come next will be kind.
I'm curious, has anyone in your life ever called you my darling girl?
I don't know. It's interesting because people have sort of said to me that there's this sort of assumption that it's like it's my mother's voice, or or a grandparent or something, but I don't know. I mean, I kind of guess possibly yes, but there were other terms of endearment, but I don't know. I genuinely don't know.
You don't have a strong memory. That was part of the question. Is there someone other than your future self, or in addition to your future self, who is accompanying you? And I kind of love the idea that this is just a term of endearment between you and you.
Yeah, and that is how it feels. Because actually, I think it's a phrase that I use to, or would use if I had a daughter. I think it's a phrase that I might use. So maybe it's for me, it also feels like there's a bit of that kind of transactional analysis, the kind parent, the sort of the adult part, caring for the inner child, the inner adolescent. And actually, yeah, maybe there's something about that phrase which enables us to tap into both, all of the ages. I mean, that's why, I use the phrase like it's for all the girls and women we've ever been, because it's all the ages. Yes. You can use the phrase "my darling girl" to a 25-year-old, to a 5-year-old, to a 15-year-old, to a 53-year-old.
Yeah, an 83-year-old.
An 83-year-old, exactly.
what it calls to mind is the practice that Elizabeth Gilbert describes that she does every morning, which is she begins writing, I think, on one side of a piece of paper that says, "Dear love, I need you," or "I need help," or something like that. And it really sounds very similar. It's just like by writing that, she taps into this voice of the one that she always wanted, and allows love to write back to her, saying all the things that she always wanted someone to say and never did. And then she just taps into that which is already part of her. I just think it's so profound, and it feels very similar to what you're talking about.
That
This,
really strikes a chord, actually. And I remember, after I published the first volume and seeing that was what she did, because often what I will do in my journal, so in my journal, I'm often writing to that voice. So my darling girl is that voice writing to me. And in my journal, I'm often writing to that voice. So I'll say, can you help me? Or I'll say, are you there? And I mean, that's my kind of, when I'm feeling lost, I will write, are you there? And they reply, always.
oh, I was just going to say that. Yeah, just waiting for you to ask. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
no,
This,
my darling
this,
girl, I was just going to say, my darling girl poems are also things that just sort of land. So again, sort of talking of Elizabeth Gilbert, she did a brilliant TED talk on genius. So after she had the phenomenal success with Eat, Pray, Love, she did a TED talk all about, the awfulness of the second novel, and and how this idea of being told that you are a genius can leave you utterly stranded creatively. And she explores the whole concept of what genius is. And originally, the term genius was something that was apart from us, like a muse, a genius. And so you're in like ancient Greek and Roman times, the idea was that your genius would every now and again like throw something at you. And, if you caught it, brilliant. If you didn't, well, you missed it. And
someone else would catch it.
Someone else would catch it. Exactly. Yeah. Someone else would catch it. It wasn't like something that like came from inside you. Yeah. And again, I sort of watched this TED talk like after having been experiencing this flow of words from the part that writes My Darling Girl, and it has never felt like me. I don't own responsibility for any of the words that land on the paper. I mean, they're not mine. This thing happens, words fall out of the pen, I end up with something, piece of paper. And one of the things that Elizabeth Gilbert talks about is a moment when I think it's Leonard Cohen, and he's driving in his car and this song lands fully formed, and he just shouts up at the sky, I haven't got a pen, send it to Dylan. It's like,
yes. This feeling of, that I've got to be there. I can't remember the poet, but she was a young girl, and she saw the poem coming. She could feel it coming and runs. She was in the field or something, and like ran as fast as she could to get to the house so she could write it down. Yeah, this feeling. Yeah, right. And I love the way Elizabeth Gilbert talks about this whole thing, and what I appreciate as a creative person is that we cannot control what comes, we can't even control really when, but what we can do is be prepared and show up and be ready to catch whatever may be coming. And this feels very much about our sort of cultivating a relationship with the inner voice that allows us to have this exchange, right? To say, are you there? Can you help me? And also to be there when she has something to say that you might not expect.
Yeah. And sometimes it's something that you might not necessarily want to hear.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Because we love getting lost in our stories. We love, holding a certain perspective. And, there are times when, certainly in my journal, I'll often, I'll be writing something and then I'll get this huge smile across my face as I'm writing. So I'll just be like, oh,
shoot.
Yeah.
Darn it.
Darn it. I was really enjoying being like, in that frame of mind. And now you've gone and just whipped the rug out from under me. Yeah. And you show me there's a completely different way to view this. And it's
right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So as you open this channel to your wise companion when you're in Ibiza, and you've now cultivated a relationship for many years. And I'm curious if you're noticing a difference in that relationship, a difference in the kinds of transmissions you get or ask for, if the voice has changed at all. How has that relationship evolved?
I think it's such a lovely question. So when I was given the opportunity to publish the first volume in early 2020.
It was pandemic.
Yeah. So
sure.
I was just thinking, actually, that's interesting. So it was like 3 years to create the first book. And then it's been like 3 years to create this one as well. I hadn't clocked that. So when
that is apparently the gestation period.
Yes, that is the gestation.
Of one book of poetry.
Exactly.
3 year gestation.
3 years. Oh, because it is like giving birth.
Yes.
That is for sure. I was really worried when I sort of sent that first volume out into the world. I genuinely thought, right, well, that's it. I'm never going to write another one. It was like, well, and I had to really work out how to be at peace with that, because I had this feeling of grief that I would know that voice wasn't going to come to me anymore. And it was almost like, well, the reason why all of these pieces came was so that they could come together into this book. You'd have that conversation with Carl. Carl would then say, well, I'd like to publish it. He would then send it out into the world, and that was it. That was what was meant to happen, and it happened. Done. Yeah. And so when that next one landed, it was like, oh, really, the relief was just enormous. But I think something has shifted. Maybe partly in the kind of my recognition that I can turn to that voice, sort of more, rather than always just having to wait for it to land, which I think is what I was doing for the first few years, was just, kind of trusting that it would turn up. Whereas now I can be a bit more, almost proactive about it and just say, you know, I'm looking for a bit of guidance, and, you know, and begin with those words, my darling girl. And I do think, there's something about the complexity of what I was experiencing with those first few poems, or those first few years of that change process, that meant that the writing itself, you know, needed to get in underneath those different layers and help create some clarity around that complexity. And I don't know if there's some, has that changed? I think only people who read the second volume will be able to tell me whether it has. I'm guessing it probably has. My instinct says it has, because I think the stuff that it's addressing now is no less deep, but maybe my experience of those things is slightly less complex, or yeah, I don't know, Susan.
Maybe you've been learning from this voice.
Oh God, I really have.
And right, and evolving. I mean, I sort of think of the two of you kind of traveling through time and space and life and this parallel track, that you'll never meet up with that voice. That voice will always be an older, wiser version of you, no matter how old you are, and but together you've been on this path of discovery and support, and
because of, you know, I'm an older version of myself now, and I'm a little bit closer to where that voice was when she was writing to me.
Right.
And so therefore the stuff, I love that. I think, and I suspect that will be the case as well for the people who read the poems and resonate with them, because they too are further along their life path than we were.
Right.
You know,
we're all different.
Yeah.
I mean, and truly, even if we go back and read the first volume, we are different people, and so we see different things and receive different things.
Yeah. And do you know what? I can go back and read that first volume. Like I do sometimes. It's like I can really happily say this, you know, I'll pick up the book and open it at random and read something completely different, and not recognize that I even was the vehicle through which
that you were actually a strong participant in that process.
Exactly. Like literally no memory of some of them. I mean,
interesting. So do you have it with you? Could you read us one from the first volume?
I do have the first one here.
Do you want to do it at random, or do you want to do the first one? Or something else?
What's your instinct?
I kind of want to hear the first one.
Okay. And I know exactly where it is, because it's the last one in the book.
Interesting choice.
Okay. My darling girl, look at all you have achieved. All the adventures, the challenges, the grand mistakes, the effortless successes, the tears and triumphs, the loves, the friendships, the never quite connecteds, the mountains climbed, rivers swam, and forests you've flown over. Look at all the things that have brought you to this place. And remember that all those resources reside within you. They are you. So this fresh future that opens up before you is one you can enter into with a glad heart and spring in your step, because you have a pocket full of everything you need to greet it. Take heart, dear girl, and remember what joy there is in stepping to the edge of the water and diving in. And remember what joy there is in breaking back through the surface and breathing deeply, lungs full and limbs strong, powerful, present, and perfect in every one of your imperfections. We are all the people we have ever been, and we hold their lessons with us, each one like a flower ready to be picked when the time is right. See the garden you hold within, and know it grows just for you, the life force to your own growth. Go, be, do.
Mm. Mm. What is it like to read that again?
Oh, it's funny. It's funny, I could honestly burst into tears right now.
Yeah. That fresh future.
And you know, and it really was.
Yeah.
It was such a huge it was such a huge thing that was happening, that was coming. And it's that voice knew. And I had no idea at that point,
right,
of the magnitude of the stuff that was coming.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to everything that happened, including that terrible experience of burning out and being so critically ill, and to all the things that happened since. And I'm so grateful that for whatever reason, I was able to find this way of reconnecting with this deep, true part of me. You know, when I first, after I retrained and learned, you know, what I do now, I called my business Regroup. And it was only after I decided to sort of change it all and just name it the Henny Flynn, and actually, like, you know, stand tall and, you know, stand in my own space and be seen, that I realized that that word regroup was actually what I'd been doing. I'd been regrouping myself. I'd been pulling all these like scattered parts in. And actually that's what that voice, that's what, you know, so much of it, when you read through the poems, so much of it is about this reconnection with self, and reconnecting with the deepest love and the deepest compassion.
Yeah. I sometimes call it remembering.
Yeah.
As opposed to dismembered, which is what often happens. We get pulled apart in our lives, and then remembering, recollecting, as you say, gathering yourself, regrouping. Yeah. And what also strikes me, and this always sort of surprises and delights me about much beautiful art, is that it is intensely personal, and yet it is universal at the same time. There is this, that it's in some ways, the more personal, the more specific it is, the more it can resonate with everyone. And so I mean, I'm thinking about your roomies at the retreat saying, okay, this is not just for you, my darling girl, maybe, but right. And so this invitation to find something for yourself within yourself, but isn't only for yourself.
I'm reminded, I think it was something that you might have said on the last episode of the podcast that we did together. Did you talk about how art for you, how that kind of creative process is something that you do because you enjoy the sharing of it? I just imagined that. No, that was right. Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And and that is part of what makes it,
that's right,
yours, is
right.
in the sharing with others. And I feel there's a real kind of resonance of that, with this too.
Right. I mean, if you think about what you were sharing about Elizabeth Gilbert and genius, and this, that the genius is sort of lobbing ideas and inspiration and all of that about, and if we're there to catch it, it is part of the process is then sharing it, right? I mean, I'm a genuine believer that it isn't, even if it comes through us, even if it feels very personal, it isn't just it's not just about us. It's about a broader experience. And one of the things that we talked about was my darling girl is, of course, a gendered phrase, one that is very precisely directed to you, Henny, in that this precious, wise voice is seeing you and acknowledging you. And yet the message is not, it's sort of this interesting paradox, right? But the message isn't just for you.
Yeah.
It's very precisely for you. And yet not only that.
Yeah, I think that word paradox is absolutely right, because it's also this. So one of the things that I've shared elsewhere is that I'm deeply mindful of the fact that it is a very specifically gender-based word, and yet the intention is that the words can be read by everybody in whatever way they most resonate with, however you identify, whatever language you identify with, whatever sort of language resonates with you. And so I suppose kind of it's really curious, actually, because I have toyed with the idea of like, should inverted commas, I mean that's a clue,
that's a red flag.
That's a red flag. Should it be my darling one, so that it speaks to everybody, it speaks to more people. But then I whenever I have that thought, that very kind of grounded, interconnected thought, I also then come back to, but these are the words.
Yeah, right.
These are the words that landed. And so it's a bit like so Anton will help me proofread the book, and is helping me proofread volume 2 at the moment. And he'll say things like, your punctuation is a little bit all over the place. And I'll go, yeah. Like, that's how
it's responsible for that.
Yeah. I mean, like, it's not really my fault, because
I'm just writing it down.
I was just writing it down. Exactly. And someone switched on the dictaphone and I just wrote what there was. And in the same way, it's like, I can't edit that, the language.
Right.
So it's called My Darling Girl, but however anyone wants to read those words, change them to whatever resonates most for you. Because this voice, I think, to your point, Susan, this voice is about being seen in the tenderest, kindest, most loving way that you can be seen. So if your phrase is my darling one, if your phrase is my darling child, if your phrase is my darling,
yes, right,
my most loved, my beloved, you know, whatever it might be, read it as that.
Yeah. And I love I love that. It's like, yes, I know, lots of commas. I had nothing. What could I
Nothing to do
say?
with it. Yeah.
It
And like,
totally reminds me, it reminds me of Emily Dickinson, who I don't know what her process was. My sense is that she was very meticulous in her composition. But I remember the story of when one of her poems was being published, and probably was being published under a man's name. I think I also remember that, which just her whole story just makes me seethe. But the editor said, you know, you didn't have your capitalization was wrong and your punctuation. So I fixed all of that. And she was just like, no, no, you don't touch it. Yeah, because this is what came and this is what I meant to say. I did not mean to say something else.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because one of the poems in the new book has got no capital letters at the beginning. And in fact, no capitals in it at all, including the word God, not capitalized. And so, and it's how it's meant to be. Like, it's just like, because the minute you bring in capitals, it confers different meaning on it, and it becomes something completely
That's right.
different.
That's right.
And so
that's right.
It is all lowercase because that's the essence of what it's about. And yeah, and also, I mean, like, there are, it's so funny when Anton first went through the book. I also realized that most of his comments were to do with punctuation, and there is a reason for this. Like, he did teach English when we lived in Egypt and Lisbon for a few years, and he was an English teacher, so you know he does know about this stuff. But a lot of the
yes,
comments
but
like, yeah,
my darling girl does not follow the same rules that
no,
Anton, the English teacher, follows. Yeah, and so I appreciate that. I appreciate that in some ways what you're sharing is this is this is the message from my inner voice, and you, dear one, darling one, have an inner voice too, and it might speak to you in different language, and yet it is there. I think that that's part of the invitation that I receive from these pieces is look, you know, she bravely caught the words from her inner wise one and bravely shared them, and invites me to find my own inner voice, my own
and to hear, you know, if those words resonate with you, if they land somewhere in your heart in the way that they landed in mine, beautiful.
Yeah.
And if they don't, that's okay too.
Yeah.
You know, like, it's all okay.
Yeah.
I think that really is like the fundamental message through every single one of these pieces, both volumes, every other, like, I have them scattered all over the place, and you know, every single one, the message is, you know, it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay.
And you're okay.
You're okay.
And I'm here with you always. Yeah.
And in fact, that is one of the poems in volume 2 begins, I am here, I am here, I am here.
Oh, do you have it?
Do you know what? I can press pause. I can find it.
Do.
Back. I might have a message to do with this one as well, Susan. Because each one was a moment. Each one was a moment in time when this is what I needed to hear. And this was, yeah, my darling girl. I am here. I am here. I am here. I am holding you. I am loving you. I am with you. This will pass. I promise you, my love, this will pass. I am here. Sit with me. I am here. Speak your words. I am here. Hold my hand. I am here. Feel your pain. I am here. Remember, love, I am here, and I will never turn away.
Yes. For you, and not just for you. Yeah. Oh my goodness. That is very beautiful. Oh, thank you. Thank you for reading that.
I'm so grateful for this conversation, you know.
Mm.
I knew this was going to be powerful. I knew, you know, there are times I share about my darling girl. I've reached a place where that agony of like birthing each poem as I sent it out into the world, it's become less painful.
Mm-hmm.
No less raw, but less painful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I've never really talked about like the absolute, like, it's like it comes up from the sort of bowels of my soul, you know?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm really grateful to you for helping me share some of this.
Mm.
And, you know, I'm also so incredibly grateful. I get so many amazing, wonderful messages from people, Susan.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I'm sure you do.
And it's the most humbling thing. It really is. Because it's nothing to do with me.
Yes, there's that paradox, right? It does and it doesn't. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah, I get that. I get that feeling of, I don't know, thank me if you like, but yeah, I don't feel like I can really take full credit for this, except for dictation.
Exactly. And you know, not adding in full stops where they're not meant to be.
That is correct. That is correct. We're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Oh, sweet friend.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing this and for sharing the new book, which is out when?
Good question. So the date for last pre-orders, so it's only available by pre-order. And the date for last pre-orders for this first print run is the 10th of May. And then, and if, yeah, I mean, just everyone listening. So if you want to get your hands on a copy, then go to the website, hennyflynn.co.uk/books, and you'll see it there. And yeah, and then hopefully really sort of getting books into people's hands end of May.
Oh, delightful. Well, that's great information. We will definitely get that word out. I'm going to skipple over to the site after we hang up. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Susan.